we're going to look at is the selection tools. So just looking over at our toolbar, we have the move tool, which is going to be a tool that you're going to be selecting and moving things around. But underneath that is where you're going to have your various types of tools. So you can click and see that between these, so you have the marquee tools, you have the lasso tools, and then below that is the kind of auto selection tools. So here normally you would see the marquee tool, but underneath that you have the elliptical, and then the single row and single column marquee tools. So these just are simple geometric shapes that you can draw out, and you can make them any shape that you want. Any rectangle that you want is the marquee tool. But if you hold the shift key down, that's going to constrain proportions, and it's going to give you a 1-to-1 ratio. So making a perfect square if you hold the shift key down. Or, oops, but you do have to release your, I'm going to drop that. Command D to drop selection, just a reminder. You do have to release the mouse before you release the shift key. I did that a little too quick, so it went back to kind of freeform rectangle. So now we've got our perfect square that's there. I can do the same thing, but with the ellipse tool. So, and I'm actually going to do a subtract. So I can subtract from the center. I can do any kind of elliptical shape that I want that's freeform. But if I hold the shift key down, and if I hold the alt key down, it's going to pull from the center and make for a perfect circle. So that's cool. So I can put that, it's like a little camera shape now selection that I've made. So just as a reminder, because we covered this in class, with all of these selection tools, you're going to have a selection tool where it just is going to make a new selection every single time. So that's the first one. So if I have a selection and I make another selection, it's going to drop the previous selection. If I have it on additive mode, which is the next button, it's going to add those things together. And then if I have a subtractive mode, I can subtract. That might not be a good, I can subtract from my snowman. Like he's getting little bites taken out of him by the squirrels on campus. And then the last one is intersect, and this is the one that I've rarely used, where it's just wherever the two selections overlap is what's left. And that's in every single one of the selection tools, not just the marquee. So if we move down here to the lasso tool, I'm going to Command D to drop my selection, and I'm going to zoom in here. The regular lasso tool, and this is like the original Photoshop selection tool, you would just draw a single line and hope you don't mess up with your mouse. So I'm on as subtractive, so I'm going to go to my additive right now. And this guy's super in my way, so I'm going to scoot it down here. So this actually works pretty well when you have some kind of pen for your tablet. It's like a Wacom tablet, which we have in our classroom, then you're more than welcome to use. Those are for you to use. But with a mouse, it gets a little tricky. So there is my very poor selection with the lasso tool. And normally I just want to point this out, when I'm making a selection, especially with a full frame, I'm going to be somewhere between 400 and 800 zoomed in, and you'll see that on the bottom left-hand corner of my screen. It says 600%. So you want to be pretty zoomed in. So I'm not super happy with the lasso tool, so I'm just going to move on to the polygon lasso tool, which that is very similar, but it allows me to go, oops, I'm going to go back, Command 0, zoom in here. and I'm going to go into additive mode. So I can zoom in and I can go point to point and it won't drop. I'm not, you know, stuck in this continuous line. And I can just click where I want it. And it's a pretty precise, very precise actually. You can use this in an incredibly precise way. But it, as you can see, takes some time. So it's slow, but you'll get a really good selection if you're zoomed in and really trying to be thoughtful about where you're clicking and dragging. And again, you can use this. I don't see a place where I'd want to cut out naturally, but let's say I overshot. Well, I got a little overshot right there. So I could click in and I'm in subtractive mode and get a better selection in that area. So you can add and subtract and intersect. The last one under the lasso tools is the magnetic lasso tool, and it's likely going to work great right here because it has a there's a very blank, this is a very simple selection for Photoshop to distinct between the foreground and the background. The only place where it might get a little stuck is where we're right next to the tree, but even that, it's doing a pretty nice job. So you can just click and you can drag down, and then, you know, it is a little tricky. If you don't move, this is where your hand tool comes to be your good friend, because I made a mistake by not switching to the hand tool, and then I got that little cutout section. Now with all of these lasso tools, you have to close them. So I need to go all the way back up here. Oops, I don't even know where I am. I just got lost. Anyway, you have to close them. I'm going to close them like that, a little squirrely shape here. But you've got to be able to close the shape either by double clicking or bringing it back, and you'll see that the little minus or plus turns into a circle, and that means that you close the shape. But hopefully, there we go. So we've closed the shape. So those are the lasso tools. The last ones are the full on auto. I'm going to drop these selections and then go down. I'm going to wait to show you the object selection until I show you the quick selection and the magic wand, the unmagical magic wand. Now the quick selection is gone through leaps and bounds of improvements. It's such a good tool now. It does get confused. It does require some refinement with the lasso tools, but it's a good tool. Like right there, it kind of overshot. So I can hold down the option key to go into the negative, or I can click on the subtract button up there, but I'm just going to hold down the option key because it's faster. So you can go in, you can also use the bracket keys to make your, to change the size of your brush that you're using, and that's universal on Photoshop, or in Photoshop and most Adobe, in all Adobe products. The right bracket makes it bigger, the left bracket makes it smaller. And that is over by just a kind of diagonal above your return key. Okay, so that's the quick selection tool. You can see it's far better, far faster than the lasso tool, but still you have to really pay attention. The other thing you can use is the magic wand, or what's better known as the unmagical magic wand. This tool chooses by it selects similar objects. So your threshold is really important. So if your threshold is more narrow, it's gonna choose it's going to choose less tones that are similar, so it's not going to expand out. If you go up higher, it's going to be less selective, and so it's going to make a bigger selection. But then what happens when you have that threshold, and you've got to really play around with your threshold settings to know, because it depends on the image, how high you need your threshold. So this was too high. Now it basically selected the entire image. And I have even some stuff in the blue, which is not what I wanted. So the magic wand, not my favorite. I'm gonna copy and paste this into a new, just to show you how much, when I brought it up to 70, it selected. So that was the whole selection, but then not all of the statue, which is kind of weird. So the unmagical magic wand, or is not the one, that's not my go-to and has never been. Now this object selection tool is absolutely fantastic, and it's like the true kind of AI selection. So you can just click and add to your selections, and it does a really fantastic job. Now it does miss some parts, but you can just keep on clicking and refining and adding to it. So I'm just trying to see what it's missed. Like it's missed this little bit here. So we want to make sure that goes in. It missed this little bit down here. So I want to make sure that goes in. So as we zoom out, we can see it's a pretty good selection. There are some things that I might want to modify. So I could come into either the quick selection tool and make sure that I'm in additive mode or subtractive. Just be aware of what mode you're in so you know what you might want to add. So I'm just adding these little areas that it missed. And then down here, I really want to make sure I take out, so I'm going to use the Option key and remove the tree that it picked up because it's not great there. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and just Command copy, and I'm going to paste. I'm going to go over to this other picture, so I just went over here. I'm going to Command paste into this other image, Command T, and I'm going to make it look like the statue is floating inside the bathtub. Now, we would need to do some finagling, but now we've got that one image inside the other. Now, there's a couple things. If I start zooming in, I'll notice that this actually wasn't that perfect of a selection. There's like a halo there that's making it quite obvious that I have, this was not meant to be in the spot. Also, the lighting's not right, but we're working on that. So I'm going to go back and we're going to actually refine the selection. So because it can be better. So now that I have the selection, I'm going to go to Select and Mask, which is up on my control panel. When I have Select and Mask, there's different settings. Oh, and I can actually see, man, I have a cutout here. I would like to remove that. And I'm just gonna click in those spots and see if I can get rid of that. Okay, so I am going to change my radius, which is like everything below is going to affect in a 1 pixel radius. So you probably don't want to go too much more than 2 pixels in most cases. And you might want to do a little smoothing. So I'm going to come in, you can see I might do a little smoothing that softens the edge of the pixels. So if I have 0, that's what it looks like. If I add just a little bit, it kind of softens it and makes it look a little more natural. You can also feather. This used to be the old school way of making it look like it blends into the background, but all it did was make it clear that it wasn't natural. So if you do any feathering, you just want to do enough to fuzz the very, very edge. So 0.2 pixels maybe. And then your contrast is a great tool because it makes the edge nice and sharp without looking jaggedy like it was originally before we smoothed it. So I added a little smoothing, but then I added some contrast to kind of sharpen up that edge again. Oops, go back to my space bar here. I might have just messed up my selection. Anyway, so those are, and then the last thing that I'm going to do is shift my edge because part of the problem was that I overshot my pixels over here, and I want to bring those in. So if you can see it'll kind of eat away at the edge the closer that I get to the left. And I don't want to do that. I might want to do like a negative 20%. Now, the last thing that you can do is look at your output settings, which is on the bottom right. And what I'm going to choose to do is move just from selection and go down to new layer with layer mask. You can also just choose layer mask. Either one is fine. It depends on what you want to do. So I'm going to choose new layer with layer mask and I'm going to click OK. And what that does is it holds the background. And this, looks like I copied and pasted into a new layer and then turned it off. But you'll see in our layers over here, and I'm going to make these my panel options a little, I'm going to make this so you can see it better. You can see that when I pull this out, that I have a layer that doesn't have an eyeball, which means that it's turned off. I can turn that back on. So that's the original one. Then I have another full image on top of it, but it has a mask on it. So the pixels are still there. They're just not, they're not deleted. So if I wanted to, let's say, modify any of this, I could come in here, I could make sure that I'm not clicked. So this is clicked, you can see the frame, it's clicked around the image. If I click over here, it's clicked on the mask. So you want to make sure that it's clicked on the mask. Now, if I paint with white, oops, I'm not, hold on, drop that. If I go to my paint brush, which is here, and I'm going to make that a lot smaller, and I paint on my layer mask, it's painting in the background. So it's removing the mask. So I'm going to Command Z those. If I switch from white to black, I can actually mask more stuff out. Now that's a really big brush. It's also a soft brush, so I could go up to 100% hardness and make it a smaller brush with my bracket keys, or I could just change it up here. And then I can come in and make some more minor adjustments. Like, oh, I actually have a little bit of this tree in there. I can remove that. So, and if I feel like I overshot, I can switch back to white and I can paint that back. So you can go back and forth. So that's the layer mask. This is another example of a non-destructive edit, just like when we spoke about layer adjustments. So that's it. That's a whole lot on selections.